Hi everyone, and welcome to the take my glasses off. Uh, Hi everyone, and welcome to the Trauma Informed Teaching module. I just want to show you a few things about this module. So I'm going to take my video off so I can concentrate. So one is that I have attached two documents. One is the Deepest Well. It's the ACEs assessment. And so if you want to maybe check your own ACEs score, you can do that there. And then the other one is Helping Traumatized Children Learn. And it's actually a full book that we'll be doing our reading out of. This is where I'm going to put the video. Here's the link to the PowerPoint. And then once again, and then here's the link to the TED Talk that I'm going to ask you to watch, and that was actually by the same woman who wrote the book, Deepest Well, ACEs, and she talks about ACEs. We'll be doing some reading in this module, and then you'll be answering some questions. All right, so let's get started. So what is ACEs? What is trauma-informed teaching? So I'm going to put this on full present, and there we go. No, is it not listening? Start presentation. There we go. Oh, nope, it's not going to listen. All right. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to talk about what happens in the body, then what is trauma. We'll talk a little bit about ACEs, and then how trauma affects learning. By the way, I also like this. I'm going to go back up. And the reason I have this heart here, whoops, there we go. This heart here is because one time I was listening to this Buddhist podcast, and it was talking about how, one of the Buddhas or whatever was saying that a lot of the lessons that he gives was not for right that moment. But that it was, the idea was that when your heart breaks, sorry, there's a motorcycle going by. When your heart breaks, that all those lessons that you learn will actually fall in. And that's, when I think of trauma-informed teaching, a lot of what I think about is all the lessons that you're just going to be putting on the surface of your heart. And then when something happens inside your classroom where you need that extra support, hopefully you'll remember, hey, wait a second, we've talked about this before, and I know some skills and some things that I can do. All right, so here we go. I'm going to start out by talking about the brain. And the reason I start out with the brain is, sorry, I'm going to try to make this a little bit bigger so you can see the bottom part. There we go. Is that really is kind of the basis of what's going on in our head and a lot of our responses. And so we have the limbic system, which is where we get our fight, flight, or freeze. We have the emotions and motivations coming from there, and we have pleasure and satisfaction coming from that part of the brain. Then we also have the prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of your brain, and at about age 16 in a normal developing brain, kids are beginning to get some of the skills like self-determination, self-regulation. They're able to kind of pause a moment before making a decision. They're starting to learn moderation and decision making and about consequences, but this doesn't really happen until you're about 25 years old. So it starts beginning at that part, but you really are learning a lot of the skills when you're older. Or as you get older. And this, once again, this isn't a normally developing teen. So this isn't somebody who has been using drugs or has dealt with trauma and those types of things. So let's keep going. All right. So what happens in the body? So in the body, you have what's called the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is like your stress. So when you are stressed, your pupils expand, your breathing becomes fast and shallow, your heart starts pumping faster, and guess what? Your gut quits digesting food. It becomes inactive. When you're calm, your parasympathetic nervous system is activated. Your pupils shrink, your breathing becomes more deep and slow, your heart slows down, and guess what? Your gut activates and you start digesting that food again. The chemicals. So when you're in trauma, when something happens that's traumatic, there's a few, these are just a few of the hormones that are released. So I'm not even going to try to, well, no, I will try to say it. It's catecholamines, which is adrenaline, and it helps you fight so that the body can fight against whatever the traumatic event is. It also helps you with flight, so that you can run from whatever your threat is. The cortisol, which affects the amount of energy your body has for the reaction. So that's, once again, that's fight or flight. Or sometimes opiates are released, and this is when you're more into freeze. So this is your body's natural morphine. It counteracts physical pain that might accompany emotional pain, and oftentimes it's tied to freezing. And then oxytocin. Oxytocin's that beautiful chemical that comes when you're in love and when you're getting a hug from someone you just are enamored with or that you just adore. And that increases positive feelings. It counteracts physical pain that might be accompanied with emotional pain. And it's sometimes part of that freezing, like you're just stuck. All right, so here are two pictures that I like to show. One of these is, and I wish I could make this bigger, but my laptop is not going to let me today with using this on Google Slides. But the big thing here is that you can see this is the normal range right here for your sympathetic and your parasympathetic. This is what we're going through all day long. You know, something will kind of like, oh, I forgot to do this. Oh, well, and then you kind of calm down, you settle down, and you get to whatever your next task is, and oh, I forgot to eat. And, you know, you kind of go up and down, and it's nothing too exciting. It's still within the normal range. After being having activation over time, then that normal range is not as common. So here you can see, you know, we've got activation, you settle, you rest, and then you've got a traumatic event, and you kind of go down for a second, and then you kind of peak up. And then you've got maybe some anxiety, maybe you decide to fight, flight, or freeze, or maybe you make it down into the normal range. You can see this is the fight and flight is right here, and above this line is the freeze. So that's when you get stuck. So these are what I like to think about as I'm teaching teaching teachers about working with students who have a rough time. Because someone who is having a rough time in your classroom, you can see that they get into the out of the normal range and the fight, flight, and the freeze range, and it's kind of all over the place. They're not just kind of going through each one of life's little turns smoothly, and so things are a bit more difficult for them. I'm going to give you break this down into 3 different reactions. So here's a mild acute stress reaction. Notice that this is the sympathetic in red and the parasympathetic in blue. So the stress, and then let's go back. The stress is the sympathetic, the parasympathetic is calm. So the blue is your calming, the red is your stress, okay? So if you are, somebody who hasn't, dealt with a lot of trauma or anything like that, and you get a mild stressor, then your parasympathetic kind of goes away, your stress response goes up, and then they kind of, around here, they kind of cross over, and then your parasympathetic or your calming system actually takes over until you return to normal. And then your stress response also kind of, it goes down until you get back to normal, and then see how they kind of work together in tandem. So that's for somebody who hasn't dealt with a lot of stress. Somebody who continually deals with stress. So chronic actually means continuous over time. So somebody who's there, you see how they start out normal, the moderate stress, so now they've been hit with stress that's more intense for them. And you can see they peak up even higher than the last one. And then their parasympathetic, their calming, doesn't go down quite as low, or, it's a little bit reduced. And you can see that it takes a little bit longer, and they never, at least on this, they don't end up getting the calm side overrunning the more stressed side. So failure to recover normally if you're continually dealing with stress. You just kind of have that heightened state of arousal is what we used to call it in some of the places where I worked. So the next one is traumatic stress. Okay, so we started out once again normal. The calming is above the stress response. You've got this traumatic stressor, and now just watch this. Here is our stress. It's extreme sympathetic response, and then you go down, and then you go up, and watch what the parasympathetic, the calming response of your body does. And it goes up even higher, so extreme parasympathetic coactivation, and then all the way down, and then all the way up, and it's just continuously erratic like that. So it's if you've ever seen a student or someone you love or care about who's really been going through a hard time, you can see that their response to everything, good and bad, and how long it takes them to recover is just more extreme in all areas. All right, so the next slide, I just have the three of these compared. And I know this isn't very big, and that's why I give you the PowerPoint too, so you can, make this bigger on your own laptop. But you can see with these three, the mild, it's, they don't go as high up on this graph. And then the chronic, it goes higher, and it's, they never quite quite recover. And then the traumatic, it's just continues to go up and down. And it's really tough to live that way. Excuse me. So now I want to just take a moment because I've gone through all of the body stuff, and I just want to talk about a little bit about what the a quote that also is a Buddhist quote, and it says, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned." And this really speaks to me because I saw this with my students all the time. They would hold on to their anger, they would hold on to their frustration, and then they would it would take them so much longer. Sorry, I had to pour some water. Just it takes them so much longer to kind of get back, and then in the end, they're the ones that were hurt, not oftentimes the person who was hurting them. All right, let's keep going. So what is trauma? Trauma is a deeply distressing experience that can affect the ability to learn, form relationships, and function within society. For example, a classroom. It comes out differently in different people, and sometimes for someone, they could actually show all of these different characteristics. So I'm just going to go over a few of them. There's aggressive, there's clinging, there's nightmares, sometimes wetting the bed. There's the student with the blank stare or who always seems unfocused. There's the apathetic, the refusing to do work, the absent or tardy, kind of checking out from like the school system. Sometimes they lose a lot of their close friends. Anxiety, self-destruction. They have difficulty with adults, an intense fear and distrust of others, difficulty concentrating or remembering. They might be a bit disorganized. They could have limited language because one of the things that trauma does oftentimes is it makes it so like, oh, I can't think of that word. And so your vocabulary almost goes down because you're using so much of your brain and your focus on just surviving. Sometimes they do participate in inappropriate behaviors. Perfectionism. They want to be perfect. When other things in their life they're not able to control, then they really hold on to everything else being perfect. Depression and sometimes suicide, and then oftentimes risky behavior. And this could be in one day. They have all of these different emotions, or it could just be, over a period of time, or maybe sometimes they never become aggressive. They stay depressed or that type of thing. All right. Now I'm going to have you stop, and I want you to listen to Dr. Nadine Burke Harris's TED Talk. And it's about 16 minutes. I'm not going to play it here, but you have the link to it. And she goes through how childhood trauma affects health across a lifetime. And she's a pediatrician actually from the Bay Area, but Kaiser actually was one of the people who she worked with the data set that they had put together. So I'm going to have you pause this video, and I want you to watch the Nadine one now. Okay, I'm assuming that you've now paused and you've watched that and you've come back. I just wanted to tell you about two other resources. As I mentioned, if you were interested, I put in the module the ACEs, how to find your ACEs score. So that is one of the attachments. And then here's just some of the information from the CDC and Kaiser study. They had more than 17,000 participants. And the big things here are if someone has 2 or more ACEs, or the amount of people with 2 or more is about 40% of the Kaiser sample. And people with 4 or more were 12.5% of that Kaiser sample. And the reason why this is important is the more ACEs that you have, the more negative factors that you might experience as an adult. So we've got the health factors like obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide, STDs, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, and broken bones. Behaviors like smoking, alcoholism, and drug use, and also life potential factors like graduation rates, lower graduation rates, academic achievement, struggling with academic achievement, lost time from work or school. And so all of these things are very serious. And this is showing also that chances are you'll have at least one student with a higher, more than 4 is what they call it, or 4 or more ACEs score in your classroom. All right, so this is the assignment for this module, is I want you to go through and read the Helping Traumatized Children Learn. And I picked out these pages, so 15 to 41, and let's see, what's the best way to do this? I'm just going to show you here. Oops, that's where that went. Okay, that's not necessary. Here we go. So this is Helping Children with Trauma Learn, and you can download this or from either Blackboard or elsewhere. Let me actually just put it in with the margins. There we go. So you can see that when you look at this, I'm just going to go to 15 because that's the first page I ask you to read. So you can see that it's not very long. And actually, it's really, really good. And so they go through with the developing brain, reactions to stressful events, and then the impact on academic performance, behavior, and relationships, and then and it continues on. So let me see. So anyway, I want you to go through and read those. Now we've got this truck backing up outside. There we go. Shut the window. So I just want you to tell me, how does trauma affect the brain? And then one example from the reading on how trauma impacts academic performance, behavior, relationships. And then as a teacher, we know that it's best to help the child regulate their emotions, maintain high expectations, create a safe environment, manage behavior, reduce bullying, create agency, build on strengths, be empathetic, and avoid labels, because you've had that in multiple of your classes and I've talked about it as well. But I want you to now name 3 academic and 3 non-academic strategies that you will implement in your class. So hopefully that answers everything that you need for this week, and to be able to really work on this module so that when we come together for our next class where we're talking about secondary trauma, you'll be ready for that conversation, and we can hopefully come up with ways to really support our children in the future. All right, thank you so much and have a great day.